uh, your way together webinar today. And it is, what is a co-op and why should I care? So we created a number of webinars throughout the pandemic in a way of like continuing our communication with co-ops. However, due to not being able to travel and have the good face-to-face conversations and asking people what they want to know, we created this Your Way Together webinar to answer any questions that people may have on what is a co-op. Many the questions that Kyle and I will be answering have been taken our social media contest that we've been running for Ask Us Anything. And so we will be addressing many of them today. I am Trista, for those who do not know me. I'm Trista Piopis-Ganeas. I'm from the Little Pine First Nation in Western Saskatchewan, and I am the Indigenous Relations Lead at Cooperatives First. And I have with me today is Kyle White.
Hey folks, I'm Kyle with Cooperatives First, joining you from Cooperatives First's main office here in Saskatoon. I'm our governance and education lead, living in Saskatoon, originally from Newfoundland and Labrador. Excited to connect with you guys today.
I encourage anybody, if you want to introduce yourself, please do so in the chat, or if you want to add in your email or LinkedIn profile and connect with other attendees, go feel free. I'd like to acknowledge that today we are in Saskatoon, the headquarters of Cooperatives First, and we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. Saskatoon has been a place for people to gather for over 6,000 years in northern Saskatchewan. And I am really fortunate that we are so close to this, the Wanuskewin Heritage Park, where it is one of the oldest meeting places in North America. So today we are answering the question, what is a co-op? And really, why should I care? So I would like to just start off with, for those who may be new to Cooperatives First, or I just like to give a highlight of who we are as an organization. So Cooperatives First is a nonprofit organization funded by Federated Cooperatives Limited and the Cooperative Retailing System. We were founded in 2015, and our organization provides co-op startup resources such as feasibility studies, business plan, online courses, incorporation support to rural and Indigenous communities across Western Canada. So our goal is to help leaders in these communities build new businesses, grow local economies, and support community development. Once again, I would like to thank everyone who participated in our contest. We had lots of great questions, and each of those questions made you eligible, and we entered you into the draw for our hoodie prize pack. We'll be announcing the winners at the end of the webinar today. So please stick around to find out if you won. Today, our goal is to answer as many of these questions and to provide some background on this unique legal structure and what makes it a great choice for starting a business with other people. We're hoping to make it a fun and informative discussion. So although we can't speak on behalf of specific cooperatives, if you do have questions about your local cooperative, I suggest you take your questions to your local cooperative, because we are unfamiliar of each rules of each individual co-ops. So today we'll cover general questions related to the model itself and general trends that we can confirm. And as today is interactive, if you do have a question, feel free to put your hand up and we can call on you to answer your question, and you can ask it live. Or if you do not feel comfortable, please write it in the chat and we will address it. So once again, thank you for coming to our webinar. So our first question, and the most pressing, is what exactly is a co-op? How does it work? And really, why should I care? So we'll just jump off right there. So I'll actually let my colleague Kyle take a first crack at it.
Awesome. Obviously, we get this question a whole bunch. I still get it from like family every time I try to describe what it is I do for a living. For folks in the call, I always find it really helpful to think of these things in their simplest form. So when I think about a cooperative, what is it at the end of the day, what's it in its most basic form? And really, it's a business model. It's a way of organizing a group of people to work together to achieve some sort of common goal. When I think about a co-op, that's really the root of what it is. I think here in Western Canada, we kind of conflate the idea of a co-op with our local gas bar or grocery store, or if you live in a housing co-op, that comes to mind. But there's so many ways you can use a cooperative to structure your business and work together. And I think we'll talk about a couple of the cool ways you can do that today. You want to build on that, Trista?
Okay, so in my perspective, what a co-op is having a relationship and a group of people that you find a common need with to work together to fulfill what that need is, to benefit both the group in itself and sometimes the community as a whole. Building on those relationships and working together. I find the group entrepreneurship within a co-op is so important, and why people should care about why this is so important is everybody has different strengths, needs, experience, views. So by working together and building off everybody's resources makes for such a great dynamic business model.
Yeah, I'd also add on the second part of that. I mean, why should people care? When you look around and see some of the challenges that we're facing in Canada, especially in rural and Indigenous communities, where you see economies transitioning, we see business owners retiring, we see young people looking for affordable housing or childcare. A lot of those things are things that historically cooperatives have been essential to in providing services for communities. So if folks don't know about that model, and a lot of folks aren't aware of how the model can be used in those situations, those sorts of services might not get provided in those communities. So that's definitely one of the reasons I think they're really important today in Canada.
Thanks, Kyle. We can go on to the next question.
Oh, and just a reminder for folks, again, if you do have a question or you want us to expand on anything or provide some examples, just drop it in the chat or hit that raise hand function. Definitely want to hear from you guys too.
Okay, so the next question that was asked was, how would a cooperative structure fit within an Indigenous community? So we've been fortunate enough to see all types of cooperatives in Indigenous communities as we have been in operation. And also I've been fortunate enough to work with people within the cooperative sector in different parts of Canada and North America. And then we've just been talking about how it has been used within Indigenous communities. And kind of the common theme is the sense of community. Many Indigenous communities, everybody is related and have the working relationships. And one of the strong foundational Indigenous values is the relationship, whether or not is to each other, to the land, to the animals, to Mother Earth. So the relationship of working together and creating a balance is one of the most important values in Indigenous communities. And the cooperative structure is the most important part of a co-op is the people and how you work together. So it is a really good fit. And we've seen one of our newest co-ops that we have been working on are elders that are looking to preserve their language and working together because they all have different gifts, and that whether or not they're fluent speakers or fluent in the written language or the hand sign language, but working together to provide those cultural teachings for future generations. We've also seen cooperatives work in Western Canada for the River Select, and that is a fishing co-op where fisheries, 8 fisheries throughout British Columbia are working together under one brand to sell their fish, bring it and reach bigger markets, but also in preserving the stock and preserving their way of life. So just being able to work together, reaching new markets, like it really does fit well within Indigenous communities.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really nicely put, Trista. To give folks a sense of Indigenous co-ops in Canada, we don't have an exact number of how many co-ops out there are, in Indigenous communities. There's no box, unfortunately, to tick to let the government know. But studies on this show that there's anywhere from 100 to 150 Indigenous co-ops in Canada, both including ones operating on reserve or on a First Nation or Inuit communities' land or Métis communities' land, or in a urban setting where First Nation entrepreneurs have started the co-op. I know we've helped a couple of groups in Calgary, for example. And they do all sorts of work. There's definitely clusters of them. I know here on the prairies, there's lots of fishing communities that are organized around cooperatives in the north, and up in the territories, the Arctic Co-op Network. There's about 33 members of Arctic Cooperatives Limited that provide retail and a bunch of other services to the far-flung Inuit communities across the territorial north.
If there are no questions, we can go on to the third question.
I'll ask this one. We got a whole bunch of questions, of course, on Facebook and Instagram asking about how to start a co-op, which I love because that's kind of what we do. That's our bread and butter. So I'll maybe pitch this question at you, Trista. What are some of the steps that you need to take to start a co-op?
The main step is people. I'm a true believer in you need people to start a co-op, to work together. That sounds to be the extremely simple. However, for working in this space, that's usually the hardest part is finding the group of people and having the same mission, vision, and values to create a business, because you are creating a business and you do need to work together. And within a cooperative, it is a structure where everybody has an equal vote. So it's a very democratic structure. So you do need buy-in from everybody within the group. So and it is a business. So making sure that there is a good idea and a market. So once you have the idea and the people, we are available to guide you through the rest of the way. Kyle, I'll turn the question back to you.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say in terms of some of the ingredients, the key ingredients that you need to start a co-op, we always recommend folks have three things generally when you're starting a co-op. One is a group. As you say, co-ops are group entrepreneurship. Most jurisdictions require you to have at least 3 people to start a co-op anyway. Here in Saskatchewan, it's 6. I think Ontario was 5. So you got to have a group, or at least an identifiable group. Usually it's good to have a leader, whether that's one person or a couple of people, someone who's got the long-term vision and can rally the supports and find money and, you know, do all the cool things, be a champion. And then you need a market and an idea that you can take in that market. And we're just in the process now of getting a new online course up and running that works through some of those really step-by-step processes. And without a doubt, the first thing you got to do, get your people, get an idea, make sure it's a good idea. And then it's just like any other business, really. Working towards making sure it's feasible. If it is, working towards incorporation, figuring out your governance, all those things. And as Trista said, those are all things that we can definitely help with. I do see we have a question in the chat from Deborah. Deborah asks, is there Indigenous funding available to start co-ops, or do you go through conventional banking? That's a good question. Do you want to take that question, Trista?
Sure. There are no specific Indigenous cooperatives. So if it is an Indigenous program, I usually suggest talking to a bank or an Aboriginal financial institution. We've been in communications with many of the AFIs throughout Canada, and just been talking about the co-op model and how it is a business model. So that's usually kind of the main places that we would start. And credit unions, because they are co-ops, are usually really good to work with. So for financing.
I would say with a couple of our clients too, we do see folks access money in ways that aren't as conventional, I guess. Like I know some of our clients have gotten funding or a little grant through their tribal council, through the First Nation to support a project. But without a doubt, co-ops can apply for all the same grants, loans as any other business. And the StatCan data actually shows us that they're usually a little bit more successful. Usually if you've got a co-op and you've got a good group of people, you've got good buy-in and good support for an initiative. So they're usually quite successful at obtaining grant funding. I hope that helps. I also see that Amike has his hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Okay, just wanted to ask, the question I wanted to ask was, I noticed you used affordable housing, both of you, when you were trying to explain forming a co-op, especially when it comes to housing. So does it mean you cannot use market housing as a strategy in a co-op?
That's a good question. And this is kind of one of my, I like to think, areas of expertise because I just love dealing with housing things. So I'll take this one. And also fun fact, when it comes to co-ops in Canada, housing is actually the most common type of co-op you're going to find. Housing co-ops account for about 1/3 to 40% of all co-ops in Canada. I would say most co-ops, most housing co-ops in Canada aren't market housing. Most of them have either obtained some sort of arrangement with their provincial or federal government, or they access some sort of grant. A lot of them got grants back in the 70s and 80s to ensure that they could offer affordable housing. So most of them operate on a not-for-profit basis. The people who live in the housing co-op are the owners of the housing co-op. and they try to provide below market rental rates. Many of them actually tie their rental rates to the income of the individuals that live there. I know the one that's just down the street from my house. That's what they do. You can, however, have different types of housing co-ops. They're just a little bit less common. So you can have home ownership co-ops, which function very similarly as condominium corporations. An individual will purchase their unit, they'll pay a market price for their unit, and then the cooperative provides those shared services and that shared maintenance, very similar to a condo corporation in that sense. That type of co-op isn't possible in all provinces. For example, here in Saskatchewan, if you're a housing co-op, you have to be nonprofit. In Alberta, you can have those home ownership co-ops, and in other places like BC, you also can. So legislation kind of messes with that a little bit. Another way you can organize a housing co-op is for seniors or for assisted living. In those cases, usually the broader community gets involved in the ownership, as opposed to necessarily just the people who are living in the housing co-op. So lots of different ways to structure a housing co-op depending on the goals and where you are. I hope that helped.
Yeah, okay, so just an additional question here. So by what you're saying if you use market housing as a strategy, you will not be able to get funding, right?
Hard to say. I wouldn't say that at all. Especially now that the federal government is kind of getting back into the housing game. The type of funding you'll get might be different. I know CMHC has a whole bunch of different programs. A couple of our clients are working with CMHC to get some funding. The type of housing you're creating will kind of determine the type of funding you can apply for, but it doesn't hurt to explore those options for sure.
Okay. Yes, Dave, because I know I've had discussions with CMHC. It seems like they don't want to hear market housing, right? It's always affordable housing. So that's why I'm asking.
For sure. But yeah, it's hard to say. But reaching out, touching base, that's definitely the best course of action there. Awesome. I don't see any other questions in the chat. No other hands up. Do we want to go to the next question, Trista?
Sure. What are some different business models or types of cooperatives?
That is a good. Sorry.
Go right ahead.
I always get excited about these sorts of things because I cover this all the time in the workshop I deliver, and we include it in some of our courses. So I find the different types of co-ops a little bit of a nunky detail, but you've probably heard us say that a little bit already. When we talk about the different types of co-ops in Canada, that really speaks to how a co-op determines who its members are or who the members of the co-op are. Some examples include a housing co-op, a consumer co-op. Certainly if you're in Western Canada, you're really familiar with those. Those are the gas bars and grocery stores where the shoppers are the owners of the co-op. But really the type of co-op you're creating just speaks to the relationship between the co-op and its members, the owners. If you're a producer co-op, it's a producer-owned co-op. Farmers or artists own the co-op and they use the co-op to add value to their businesses. Broadly speaking, I tend to think about of 5 or 6 different types of co-op in Canada. And that's a consumer co-op where the consumers are the owners, a producer co-op where people who produce things or make things use the co-op to add value or reduce costs, an employee-owned co-op where the business is owned by the people who work at the co-op, a multi-stakeholder co-op where you've got some combination of those, an investment co-op, which aren't as common, but we're seeing lots of them pop up, certainly in Eastern Canada and here in the West, where people pool some investment dollars to fund economic development projects. And then we have a community service co-op, which is a nonprofit way of doing things like daycares, seniors housing, recreation rinks, those sorts of things are structured as a community service co-op. And it's, again, a nonprofit way of doing things. But in terms of how a co-op can work from an operations perspective, or what industry you might see a co-op in, the full gamut. We've got co-ops in just about every industry in Canada, except for mining. I think I just haven't heard of any. But you can pretty much ensure that a co-op can look and sound and feel just like any other business. It's just that ownership model. That's the big difference.
I'll jump in just with kind of, Kyle did cover the different types of co-ops, but it's really on how the people want to work together. He did touch on the community services co-op, which, like we mentioned, could be one of the housing co-ops or daycares. One of the most interesting models that I've seen, the elders co-op, the language is a community services co-op, but I've also seen health centers have a community service co-op to provide health services. And there's like an interesting one out in Vancouver where it is the Indigenous communities with the health services to have a holistic approach in providing health services to the people who use it. So the members are the community itself. The employee owned or workers cooperative. My favorite example for there is the Northern Star Blanket Workers Cooperative, where it is a group of women in northern Winnipeg came together just to sew blankets together. And from the sales of that, they just receive a wage. But it's because they enjoy working together and working on these projects that they created this cooperative. Producers, how, like, the most important thing within whether or not it's artisan or farming is that the producers get to focus on what they are good at, which is producing the items. They don't want to be bothered with administration and marketing and like dealing with pricing and negotiations. They just want to do what they're good at, and using the cooperative as a tool in order to get their products out there. So like I love the producer as well, because it's people coming together to meet demand and being able to scale up while still focusing and with less stress on the individual of trying to take care of it all themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Awesome. Okay.
Okay, Kyle, which provinces have co-ops?
That's a good question. I was glad to see that we got that one on Facebook. All provinces have co-ops, of course. I think every single province or territory in Canada has at least 10 co-ops. I can say that with some certainty, I think. I think the Yukon territory has maybe the fewest in Canada, but you can find co-ops all over Canada. There's definitely concentrations, though. Here in Saskatchewan, we've got a bunch of co-ops. We've got lots of the grocery stores and gas stations, but we've also got a ton of daycare co-ops and childcare co-ops. We've also got lots of community halls and rinks that are structured as co-ops. If you head over to Vancouver, you'll see about, I think, 300 housing co-ops, a good concentration there. Ontario, of course, has more co-ops than we do because they're, 5 times our size, 6 times our size. And you'll find the most co-ops in Quebec. The government of Quebec has far more supports for financing and information about co-ops than I think any other government in Canada. So you see about, I think, over 2,500 co-ops just in the province of Quebec. And as I mentioned before, the most common type of co-op that we see is a housing co-op. So a good section of those in each of those provinces are housing co-ops. But as you'd expect, we've got a lot more agricultural co-ops out here in the West. You see fishing co-ops in areas where there's lakes. You see them in the Maritimes. Yeah, but all provinces have co-ops. You go to any province or anywhere in Canada, you're going to find a co-op for sure. It just might not necessarily market itself as a co-op.
All things.
So I'll maybe ask you another question then, Trista.
Sure.
Let's this is a good one, and we got a lot of questions about this, but the big one is, how do co-ops work? What's it like to be a part of a co-op?
Okay, so co-ops work where the owners are called the members. And it is an equal, everybody is equal in there. So, and everybody gets vote. So it's like the one vote per, like one chair, one vote. Everybody has like the one vote. Whereas in a corporation, it's usually who has the most shares and who puts in the most capital gets the most say. Whereas in a cooperative, everybody has one vote. And it's just a more fair business model. And what it's like to be a member of a co-op is, speaking on personal experiences, it is being able to vote in decisions for what's going to affect myself and my community, and being able to see the benefits and the profits retained within the community, and not going to a large corporation where I don't know who the owners are, but the profits stay local.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell folks, sometimes you hear folks complain about a co-op that they've been a part of or what have you. And I say, well, did you go to the AGM? Did you ask questions? Did you find out why they didn't work that way or why they weren't doing things you'd like to see? And if they weren't, you should go run for the board of directors. You've got that option as a member of a co-op. Anyone who's a member of the co-op can run for that board of directors. As John kind of points out there in the comments, democracy and transparency are really key to how co-ops work. We had a whole bunch of questions kind of in this line of thinking. Maybe we can do like a bit of a rapid fire in terms of these questions. We had somebody ask, how much is a co-op membership? Trista, how much did you pay for your co-op membership?
For my local consumer co-op, I paid $10. For it really depends. Like when I work with groups and they want to know how much a membership to any co-op is, it really is up to the members to decide how much the membership share should cost.
Absolutely. I think even just with our clients, the lowest I've seen is $1. You just pay $1, you're a member of the co-op. The most I've ever seen was $50,000. That's an expensive membership. But of course, the co-op was a membership of really big businesses, and the co-op was integral to how they were going to operate. So $50,000 seemed reasonable, but it's really up to those members to decide how much they need to raise to finance the starting of their co-op. Oh, I think we've got a question from Arlene. You're on mute, Arlene. Oh, there you go.
I'm not muted anymore. Okay, good. Okay. I work for local farm and food co-op as their Indigenous relations coordinator. And we're trying to figure out what a proper fee for service model would be for some of those services that we provide for our members. And so I don't know if it's a co-op because per se, but we do have a lot of members of that co-op. They tend to be producers, farmers, and that type of thing. And so sometimes they require more services. So we're trying to figure out the pricing model, which makes sense for the fee for service piece so that we don't have to only rely on government funding. And I'm sure there's some other people here that are in that boat too.
That's a good question. I mean, I guess off the top of my head, I would say if it's possible and feasible with the number of members you have, maybe try and conduct a poll, a member survey, get some feedback around what value folks are okay with placing on the services they're getting from the co-op, to ensure, you know, that the co-op is covering its costs. Alternatively, it might be helpful to work with a third party. I know some of the consultants we work with, they offer some great, not only expertise, but just having someone from the outside offering fresh eyes on your operations might be helpful for figuring out how to structure a business model for the co-op or to structure that fee for service. Yeah. Anything to add on that, Trista?
Yeah, I think it's just, knowing your costs. That's usually what I ask, and then just making sure your costs are covered. So, but with everybody's needs varying, it can be. So like I would agree with Kyle's answers.
Yeah, because it's everything is so multi-jurisdictional, right? You know, Canada is a huge country with varying costs all the way across. And how do you provide value to your clients while still covering your costs is always, and I'm almost wondering if it might be fun to have an association of co-ops just as people who can talk about these challenges as we're dealing with them and get some feedback. I think that actually would be a really great webinar.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, funny you should mention, I mean, there are associations of co-ops.
Yeah.
Usually there's one per province. They may have some good resources or similar members as yourselves that would be open to bouncing some of those ideas off of. Co-ops Mutuals Canada is the federal one, but of course, each province has one as well. We've got Saskatchewan Co-op Association or BC Co-op Association.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
No sweat. I guess further to that, we had another couple of questions about being a member of a co-op. Is there a monthly fee for being a co-op? Maybe. Definitely if your co-op sees the need to have some sort of monthly fee, like if you're a housing co-op and you're charging monthly rent, there's a good reason there for having some sort of monthly membership fee. But at least the groups we work with, most of our clients, they don't usually do a monthly fee. They do that one-time upfront payment where you purchase your shares in the co-op.
Yeah, and it depends on because the shares and the fees would be different. Those are different types of fees that the co-ops could implement. So to actually vote would be the membership share, but the ongoing costs and covering costs of the co-op would be the fees associated with that. So I don't know if you have anything else to add about that.
That's all good. You know,
I'm just wondering.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, in terms of management fees, we're talking about fees here for co-ops. I've been to a meeting up in Winnipeg at one time, and I met with the Arctic Cooperatives Limited people. You know, they have the umbrella, you know, board of directors, and then they have all these cooperatives, you know, from 32 different communities. And the way I understand it, there's some kind of a management fee, right? You know, to pay for some of the costs. Is that, you know, and we're talking about associations here, you know, would that operate similar to that?
It certainly could. I mean, Arctic Co-op's definitely one really good example, and they're really well established. So they've had, I guess, decades to really perfect how they build out their business model and what their fee structure looks like. I'm not sure what that looks like. I'm not as familiar with their bylaws or their management agreements with co-ops, but most certainly, I mean, any sort of association or co-op like that really needs to get a good sense of what their costs are, what price their members are able to pay, to ensure that they're covering their costs and aren't, financially hurting themselves. But one of the other big benefits of a co-op is that if the co-op does turn a profit, it can give a portion of that profit or a portion of those monies back to its members. And that actually is one of the questions we had on Facebook as well, was, what are co-op rebates based on? And it's just that, those sorts of management fees, the cost of goods that you buy at the co-op. At the end of the day, when the co-op sits down and it turns a profit, it can give that profit back to its co-op members, and they do so based on how much you've used the co-op. So if you're spending more at your local co-op, you might get a greater share of that profit back in turn.
Yeah, it's a great model that the more you use the co-op, the more you get back. So in the case of producers, the more products that they sell through the co-op, the greater patronage they could get back at the end once they're turning a profit. So
yeah.
Okay.
Very cool. All right, shall we move on our questions list, Trista?
Sure.
Okay.
I will actually ask you this question. We'll move on to when did the cooperative movement begin in Canada? And what are some resources on the history of cooperatives in Canada?
That's a good question. We can't be 100% certain on what the first co-op in Canada was. From the books that I've read, it's likely that it was some sort of dairy co-op in Quebec or upper or lower Canada, I guess, at the time. That was probably the first co-ops in Quebec. The first one that would be, I guess, attached to, say, a cooperative movement or a cooperative store would have been in Stellarton, Nova Scotia in 1961. That was really the first co-op that was opened in Canada that used the model that was really laid out by the Rochdale pioneers in the UK. That idea of that eventually led to, say, the cooperative values and principles. The first one of those to start in Canada was 1861 in Nova Scotia. If folks are interested in learning more about, say, the history of co-ops in Canada, it really is quite interesting because, of course, we're talking about people trying to make a go of it in a harsh prairie or Canadian landscape, and they're doing so by working together. It's a lot of cool stories. There's lots of great books or resources or papers written by folks like Brett Fairburn, who is at Thompson Rivers University, Ian McPherson, Lou Hammond Kettleson. Those are some great scholars who've put out just wonderful books and papers about cooperatives in Canada. If you want a bit of a consolidated history, I guess, we've got a great online course that was developed for employees of the federal government. If you check out our website and our online courses, it's called Co-ops in Canada. There's a section in there that does a bit of a dive into how cooperatives started in Canada and what their current impact kind of looks like in the Canadian economy. So those are definitely some resources. If folks want to connect afterwards, I can definitely send you a link to some book or paper recommendations.
Kyle, thank you for your answer. I'm actually going to provide a different answer to that. When did co-op or the concept begin in Canada? As an Indigenous person working cooperatively and working as a group has been in existence since since people have been on Turtle Island, whether or not it's fishing, hunting, gathering. So the concept of cooperatives have actually been working within Indigenous communities for as far back as history allows. It's, yeah. So I'm glad Kyle did give a history of the Western concept of cooperatives, but cooperatives have been within Indigenous communities forever. So.
No, absolutely. I would agree. Thank you for acknowledging that, Trista.
We do see one question within the chat. If we have any stories of co-ops that were impacted during COVID.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yes. In short, I mean, and in every way that you can imagine, really. We saw a number of co-ops that had to close due to COVID-19. They just couldn't sustain operations. There's that old story. We saw lots of co-ops do new and innovative things during COVID-19. A lot of course, frontline staff had to respond very quickly. So I think co-ops, like a lot of other businesses, really did cool things. Here at Cooperatives First, we actually saw some pretty cool things happening that first year of the pandemic. I'm not sure if it was because people had some more time on their hands because they were working from home, but we saw lots of people try out new things. We saw people pursuing kind of side projects or hustles or new approaches because of the pandemic. One of the cool ones, and I'll share this story, is the art co-op, they call themselves, which an art stands for At Risk Together. The goal of that cooperative, and it's here in Saskatchewan, is to provide a childcare cooperative and childcare space, and eventually maybe even a full school for children and students that have are immunocompromised. I think the pandemic really brought that concern to bear for lots of parents. They had to make a bit of a call about how to help facilitate their child's learning in a safe environment as possible. And having some sort of organization that ensured and guaranteed the safety and maybe paid some extra attention to that was something that folks wanted. So they found enough people with that as a common goal, and they created the At Risk Together childcare co-op in early 2020. And I think they're making pretty big strides towards getting operational here in Saskatoon.
I have one example. It's actually it's not a Canadian one, but it's one of my, I would say, cohorts in the US help a cooperative in Oregon. And it's the Res Chicks cooperative. And it was a really interesting story of how 4 women had beginning of the pandemic, and they would go to their local grocery store and there was no food on the shelves. Like everything was disrupted and they were unable to, like they were wondering how are they going to feed their families. And so one had researched purchasing eggs and chickens, chicken laying eggs in order to like just get through the pandemic, thinking that it wouldn't last so long. So after research, the 4 of them decided to build a chicken coop, buy some chicks and raise them to get some eggs as a means to feeding their families. So just based on the research, they found that that there's like a very high mortality rate within chicken, those types of chickens. But fortunately for them, they didn't lose any chickens. And so they had way more eggs than they expected. And this was just to get themselves through the pandemic. And so they had, so they were producing eggs, but because of regulations, they couldn't sell them. So they were just, gifting them to their friends and family. But as more chickens were bored and they had much more, they went to the USDA to get certified to create a program, and they ended up providing eggs and selling them within their local communities, their the school, like, and then when they had they were giving out food within their local tribe, they were providing the eggs for other tribal members for their rations. So like that was one really cool story to hear of how these women just came together and worked, and it wasn't something they had planned. It was for survival, but it ended up growing in the face of the pandemic.
Very cool. I see we're getting close to our closing time. So maybe we can do like a last call for questions for folks in the chat. And while people are doing that, Trista, I've got another question from you from our friend Eugene on Facebook. He asked, what kind of support does Cooperatives First provide? And what kind of support can they provide to an Indigenous entity?
Okay, so our support is I'm one to say my role is to work in the conversation. So if there is an idea and there is a group that want to start an idea, so we have what we call an explore meeting just to hear of the ideas, how the co-op can fit and how it could work. Looking at the market and really flushing out the ideas of the group. I've been working with groups and trying to figure out what everybody's strengths are and what everybody can bring to the co-op. And then from there, depending on the direction the groups want, we do offer the business plan and feasibility studies. We have incorporation support, and we can help with developing bylaws that reflect what the co-ops want and how they want to be structured themselves. One of the most important things is how when we work with groups, it is the co-op's idea. It is the co-op, they own it. We don't own it, so we're not going to tell people you have to follow these rules. It's what is best for the group itself and the community and how they want it structured. And what can we provide? Well, we provide our time. Our time, people do not have to pay for working with us. There can be a small fee with incorporation support, but that is, we work on a cost recovery for what each provincial legislation requires. And I think for us working and talking through and not making the entire process overwhelming is something that I find people are very appreciative of. I have brought up the elders cooperative over and over throughout this hour. But one way that when we were able to work with them was they had their traditional language actually and their terminology built within their incorporation documents and their bylaws so that it is reflective of their values and how they see fit. We were able to work with the Information Services Corp, so the province, to make sure and to help with the translation. But yeah, that was one of the first cooperatives that we're aware of that have the traditional language right into the provincial documentation. So.
Very cool. I think you hit all the key points on that one, Trista. Nice. Maybe final call. Any questions from folks here today before we move towards winding down our webinar? While folks are thinking, just for you guys' information, I did share some links and some resources in the chat if you want to keep learning with us, by all means, check out some of our other webinars, some of our online courses, or if you do want to start a co-op, I've shared some information about the types of supports that we offer that Trista just touched on.
Okay, so well, if we're waiting for any more questions, I will announce the winners of our contest. So if the people are, the winners are not in attendance, we will reach out on Facebook in the method that they submitted the question. So we have Maureen Liz, Jean Ouellette, and Janice Quernier. So congratulations. We will be reaching out to get your contact information so we could send off our prizes. So thank you very much for everybody who submitted a question, and also one final announcement is right now we are actually hiring a youth position for the summer. So if you have anybody who is under the age of 30, either with some university experience or university degree or still a student, please let them know that we have a job posted for a summer research assistant. And in this position, we're actually getting the students to be reaching out and researching Métis communities throughout Western Canada. As Indigenous Relations Lead, I'm very comfortable in working as a First Nations person. I'm very, this is my background, but Métis are so important in the Indigenous space. So we'd love to grow our offerings to include more Métis content. So Kyle, if you have.
No, I think that's all. I'm really glad that everyone was able to join today, and thank you guys for your wonderful questions, both the folks on social media and here on Zoom with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and I hope you guys enjoyed the rest of your day.
Take care, guys.